Hello and welcome to the Detective Case
and Detective Close podcast.
We're your hosts. I'm Aaron Shirley.
And I'm Brian Townsend.
Today we have a really special guest with an amazing career and amazing resume. Potentially one of the most interesting men in law enforcement history. And I think because his resume is so vast, I don't know if I even have the ability to introduce him. So I'll let Brian introduce him.
Yeah, it's like several different movies stitched into one career, one life. So when Hollywood comes to come to speak to you, and I'm certain they will, make sure you remember us little guys. So
I'm going to have to give
an extra.
You guys in for sure. Yeah.
He started as an FBI accountant chasing seven-figure money launderers, but through a series of high-stake turns, he became a sniper and eventually a master bomb technician. From the 51-day standoff at Waco to the front lines of the Oklahoma City bombing, the Atlanta Olympics, and Ground Zero on 9/11, he has been at the center of the most defining moments in American law enforcement history. He is the author of the new memoir, Hazardous Devices, retired FBI veteran, and a current instructor at the Forensic Science Institute. Please welcome to the show, Barry Black.
Thanks, Aaron. Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for your time.
No, we're honored to have you on, and really, I think we just want to just dive right into some of the specifics. I mean, like we said, some of the most defining moments in history you were a part of. You had a front row seat to. So, if you don't mind, let's just start there.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm an accountant in the private sector. Wanted to be in the FBI since I was just a kid. So, just getting to the academy, becoming an FBI agent, was kind of a childhood dream. And frankly, pursuing that accounting degree was just a means to an end. I never wanted to be an accountant, but the FBI was hiring accountants at the time. So I changed from engineering, which was my original degree, got the accounting degree specifically so I could get in the bureau. And
Wow.
I'm thankful it worked, but I knew I was going to be relegated to white collar crime, which was fine and interesting, but then some other opportunities arose.
I think that's what a lot of people, and for any public watching this podcast, may not understand. Not everyone in law enforcement goes to college and leaves with a criminal justice degree, right? Especially, I think, in federal agencies. They're not necessarily looking for criminal justice applicants, right?
Right. And even I teach now at the University of Central Oklahoma's Forensic Science Institute, and it's we have biologists, chemists, criminal justice for sure. Three of my students we started yesterday are going to go to law school. So it's a broad base degree because the Bureau specifically wants a broad base of people because we're going to interact with the public on a daily basis.
What was your original degree, or what did you want to pursue originally?
So I was in industrial engineering. You have to do something, and that sounded like a pretty good way to go. My freshman year, so I had been in touch with the FBI. I had a little league coach that was an agent, so he was sort of a role model a bit when I was younger. I kept calling him through high school, and he was kind enough to answer all my questions. But by the time I was a freshman in the university, he said, you probably need to start talking to a recruiter that can give you, more direct information. And she was frank, pretty blunt. She said, less than 6% of applicants get in. So basically good luck, but you can kind of increase your chances if you pursued something other than engineering, like accounting or law. And of course, law school's a few more years of college, but she offered kind of a shortcut back then. This is the late 80s. Accountants were in such short order that if you had an accounting degree, they had an accounting exam, like the ASCPA exam. And she said, if you can pass that test, we'll waive the next requirement, which is 3 years of work experience.
Wow.
So it sounded like a pretty good deal. I changed majors, got the accounting degree, somehow passed the accounting exam, and then got in when I was 24. I was the youngest agent in my academy class. And when I got here to Oklahoma, I was the youngest agent here for a long time.
You changed your degree overnight. You were laser focused, like you said, on this goal. What is this, a high school thing? Like why FBI? Like, why such an early age in your life? Was that your goal line?
It sounds silly, I guess. Some kids want to be in the NBA or Rhodes Scholars or astronauts or whatever. Since I was a little kid, about 10 years old, it was the movies, TV. It was that small group that's kind of doing the elite stuff. It was very appealing. And then when I met my coach, my little league coach, he was a great guy, good role model, and I sort of what I set my cap for. And, if you don't try, you're not going to get it. So yeah, I wanted to pursue that goal and not regret having not tried, but it worked out well. And at a pretty young age, I got in and was able to stay a little over 31 years.
That's impressive.
It's interesting, like how that kind of happened though, because we talk about that in our leadership classes, how important servant leadership is, and serving your community, and what an impact that had on you, playing little league, right? Like your coach.
Sure, you don't know who you're going to impact. Every day you're out meeting somebody, whether it's, the little old lady at the store who needs a little help or whatever it may be. But, just try to be kind to others. I convicted a guy and we just finished his sentencing and he was going down to the marshals to be processed before he went to prison. And he called my name, starts coming at me down the hall. I thought, well, okay, here we go. And he stuck out his hand, said, "You always treated me kindly, like a man. You didn't have to. I appreciate it." And, so we shook hands and he went to jail. So you don't have to be mean about things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about some of the specifics. I want to talk about how, well, let's just, I'm going to back up here. You go from accountant to originally sniper or originally bomb technician?
So back in the day when I got in, you're on probation for a year. They've extended it to 2 years now for new agents. But that first year, you're with a senior seasoned agent, and it's a training agent. Law enforcement calls it a field training officer. Everybody has somebody they kind of shadow. And my guy happened to be, he was a J. Edgar Hoover hiree. He was a Hoover guy, electrical engineer, pilot. He was a pretty hard charger, but he was the sniper team leader. He was a competitive marksman outside the bureau, and just a great guy. So we spent that year together. We got to be very, very good friends. And one day he said, "Hey, why don't you come out to the range with me?" And of course, he had, I was shooting M16s back then, and he had his custom bolt action sniper rifle, which, who wouldn't want to go? So we went out, fired a few rounds, and he said, "You know what, why don't we just do this every Wednesday?" So each Wednesday we'd go to the range and we shot a lot. And after a while he said, "I think you might be a good fit for the SWAT team. Why don't you try out?" And, there were tryouts. So I was happy to make the team. And then obviously you had to be a team member before you could even apply for sniper school. But once my probation was over, I got on the SWAT team. Next opportunity came. He put me in for the sniper school. And I thought, well, okay, I had kind of peaked. My career was where I wanted it to be as a kid. There were shows like SWAT and, the FBI Story and all the old shows, So I was pretty happy. I was doing some white collar stuff and able to do the tactical thing. But the first major call out was the Branch Davidian standoff down in Waco. So that was, we've done some manhunts and some other types of tactical operations, but that was, well, it was a first. It had never happened before, a 51-day standoff like that. So the government learned a lot. The Bureau learned a lot. I learned a lot being down there as far as the command and those things. But that was the first protracted tactical event I had on the team.
Were you down there the entire 51 days?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we just gotten married and we were unpacking from our honeymoon. And one of her bridesmaids called and said, "Hey, I heard some agents got killed." Well, we hadn't seen the news. We've been overseas. So we turned on CNN, which was the only news station at the time. And they had live coverage from Waco. And of course, it wasn't the Bureau. It was another organization that had executed those warrants or tried to. Well, about that time, my pager went off. We had the height of technology at the time was a pager that you could get 10 characters on, right? So it was a SWAT call out. And my wife, Kelly, she goes, "Now, how does this work exactly?" I said, "Well, I think I'm going to pack for 3 days." I said, I think it'll be resolved before we even cross the Red River down into Texas. But I'm going to go ahead and pack for 3 days. I'll call you when we get there. And when we got there, had the brief. Our team was deployed almost immediately after the briefing from the ATF Special Response Team. And ended up there for 51 days. She drove to Waco so we could pick out our wedding pictures. You remember back in the day when they were 35 millimeter pictures, and you had to get the proofs back to the photographer. And that photographer was adamant. He wanted his proofs back. So she and my sniper partner, his wife, drove my wife down, and we sat on the bed in the Holiday Inn and picked out our wedding photo.
That's incredible. So this is a long time. So how do you maintain focus as a sniper for such a long time? Like, what do you, because you know that you might have to make a split second, action or a decision. So how do you maintain that focus during, such an extended amount of time?
So that's a great question, Brian. The amount of time you can be on the scope or on the rifle is limited just because it's very taxing. So as it became apparent this was going to be a protracted operation, more teams came in. Our hostage rescue team, HRT, is in Quantico, so they flew out, and of course that's what they do is hostage rescue. But the negotiators were doing their best to negotiate, and there was a tactical resolution that was a plan. But to answer your question, we brought in more teams, which come with more sniper teams, and you just rotate in and out. HRT was closer to the compound, so eventually the field snipers, such as myself, were detailed to support the HRT snipers, which is how I ended up in what they call Sierra 2, one of the positions behind the compound.
And that's how you were able to go look at wedding photos, right?
Well, yeah, so it was a 12-hour shift with an hour brief one way and before and after. So after 14 hours, yeah, I got to go see my wedding pictures.
So a lot of folks think snipers are just shooters. I mean, you're intelligence gatherers. Can you talk about that? I mean, what are you seeing? What can you provide to the rest of the team, the negotiators, as a sniper?
Sure. The marksmanship obviously is a critical part of it, but that's sort of a last resort. It's the last thing anybody wants to do. I would say the primary objective is intelligence gathering. You're the eyes and ears forward of the rest of the team, reporting usually to a sniper command, which is embedded in the emergency operations center or the tactical command center. So high power optics from pretty long distances to provide actual real time information that commanders can use to make strategic decisions.
The 51 days is insane. So you said when you mentioned 3 days, it was the same thing for us for SWAT operations. We would have extended stay gear, but our definition of extended stay was the same. It was 3 days.
Right.
People don't realize, like, yeah, 51 days, but no, that's 24 hours a day for 51 days straight of an active operation.
Well, and two, this is 1993. We didn't have direct deposit or a corporate credit card, so when you went to get a meal, you had to have enough cash or use your personal credit card. Well, 50 days in a hotel gets pretty expensive, so eventually they brought in a pay trailer and set it up inside the perimeter, but outside the range of the 50 caliber rifles that the Davidians had. And every Thursday we would line up, sign for cash enough to pay our hotel bill, and then do a voucher for a 50 some odd day deployment once we got back. But I remember one morning we came in after it was effectively a 14-hour day, and the manager of the hotel said, "Hey, we really appreciate what y'all are doing, but there's a basketball team coming in to play Baylor, and y'all need to vacate your room." So we got tossed out of the hotel. So another team would come in and play ball, which is all good. We found another place to stay.
We appreciate you protecting, serving, and protecting the community, but basketball is in town.
Yeah, well, it's a college town, so that happened.
No one thinks about the logistics. I mean, it's incredible to hear that from someone that was there. Switch gears from sniper to bomb technician. So now you're going from someone who's hundreds of yards away to someone who's running up to the danger. Talk about that transition, that shift. I mean, how did we even get there from sniper to bomb technician?
Well, when the fire erupted at Waco on April 19th, our team went down to secure the scene. It's a crime scene at that point, so it was still burning when our team went down there, and firefighters were putting the fires out, and it was horrible. It was a horrific scene. But some men approached that I didn't know, I didn't recognize, and there were FBI bomb techs that were there in case there was any unexploded ordnance or IEDs left in the debris. And so I asked, well, what do you guys do? And they said, well, the FBI trains and certifies all the non-military bomb techs in the country, and we traveled around the world, blow stuff up, do counterterrorism training. I was like, all right, I want to do that. How do you get to do that? And much like the sniper team, I said, well, it's a pretty small group. There's only about 200, maybe 220 FBI bomb techs in the world at any one time. But, throw your name in the hat, good luck, see what happens, which is sort of the Bureau way.
Yeah.
So when I got back from Waco, I did the paperwork, submitted my application, and was pleased to get accepted to the Hazardous Devices School in 1994. So I finished bomb school in 94, and 53 weeks later was the Murrah building bombing. So that was my first bombing case. And my wife, who put up with me through the whole Waco thing, she was actually in the Murrah building. She left the building 2 minutes before it detonated, drove right past the device, and I didn't know where she was for about 90 minutes. So, yeah, these things can hit pretty close to home quickly.
Yeah, and so connected to Waco, obviously April 19th again. I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons, but now you're on scene of, the Oklahoma City bombing. I don't know how much big. Well, till 9/11 doesn't get much bigger, right? And
Right.
give us a lesson. What are you learning as a young bomb tech that carries with you for to 9/11 or even past into your career?
But we're human, but mistakes are not well tolerated, whether you're a sniper or a bomb technician. There's a very small margin for error. That morning when I arrived, I'd had post-blast training, right, as a bomb technician, and the FBI's version of CSI is called ERT. It's the Evidence Response Team. Well, it was brand new as well. I helped start that here in Oklahoma City. So we had training on what were then kind of standard events, but this was unprecedented. Even the attack, the first World Trade Center attack, was about a 1,200-pound device inside the garage. So it destroyed about 6 floors of a building. This was roughly a 5,000-pound device outside the building, destroyed that city block, damaged 300 other buildings, registered like an earthquake. This was an unbelievable blast. And when I showed up, the devastation was really undescribable. Everybody has their part to do. I was the bomb guy on the evidence response team, but there were wounded, walking wounded, people trapped in the building, people that didn't survive. So we just count on everybody else doing their part, and they presume we'll do our part. And it's a team effort. It's not just the Bureau, our state and local partners. Everybody came. The partnerships that we had developed prior to the event were strengthened really because of the event. But those partnerships are critical in any one of these large cases.
Yeah, Aaron and I talk about that a lot, just developing these relationships, these partnerships, and not only developing them, but maintaining them, right? And when, God forbid, you're in a situation like that, but you need that, those relationships, right? You don't want to pick up the phone for the first time and talk to someone. Hopefully you're already having those discussions and, and thinking about being prepared and the training and all the things go behind that. So,
well, and it's even beyond, law enforcement, the first responder, medical community. Very early on, somebody said we need a laser transit to see if the building's safe enough to continue trying to recover people. Well, I quit engineering. I didn't know what a laser transit was. But they said, yeah, this is what we need. Well, the Army Corps of Engineers was en route, but my neighbor was an engineer. So I called him. It was before sunrise. I said, hey, do you have a laser transit? He said, yeah. I said, can we borrow it? Sure. So he brought it down. It was that kind of community response. We brought in dogs to find victims, and their feet were getting torn up on the rubble. So there was a call out for little, basically dog booties, and they came in by the truckload. The community, well, actually, just this community, the national response was really heartwarming and unbelievable.
So I think it's interesting, going back to what you said earlier. So you said when you're a new agent in the FBI, it's a 2-year essentially field training process.
So back when I started, it was one.
Yeah,
So
but now
now it's two.
it's 2.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because it's like in our career fields that are law enforcement. I mean, that's at the high level, but you think about all the city, state, locals, right? The field training process is 12 weeks, 16 weeks, right? You're getting 3 to 4 months of training, and you never know any given minute what's going to be thrown at you.
Right. And I've had the luxury and pleasure to teach at law enforcement academies and military academies around the world. And some of them are senior level, colonels and up to generals. Some are street level wire cutters and shooters, a pretty broad array of experience. But that's what you have to prepare for, is the thing you don't know. And my students now, the college students, if you've never been in those positions before, it seems crazy to think, well, what if that guy has a gun, or what if they come at me with a knife? But you don't know, so you always have to be prepared, and that's part of the training.
That's something we push a lot because it's like, we can only train you so much because you just never know how something's going to branch. And that's why we push like, hey, we need people that not only can do this job, but like, hey, can you think critically, independently, and outside of the box?
Right, because and particularly in law enforcement, most are in that unit alone. The luxury we had with the FBI, particularly on the SWAT team, we knew everything about the people we were going to arrest. I mean, everything about them. And we chose when and where the arrest would happen. And we would usually have at least 2, if not 4-to-1 advantage, just because that tends to take the fight out of people when you're heavily outnumbered and outgunned. But law enforcement, you stop a car for no tail light, and they may have just robbed a bank or kidnapped somebody. So you just don't know. It's a very difficult job these men and women do.
So another big incident was the Atlanta Olympics. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong. 1996.
96, yes.
So not too long after Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City is obviously on the big stage, but now you're kind of on the world stage. I mean, obviously the world knows about Oklahoma City, but now does the pressure change? What changes when you're, I mean, this is the Olympics, right?
Well, the events themselves they're all high profile. Now things have changed. In my 31 years, there was no codified incident command system, ICS. Of course, everybody operates on that now. The joint information centers and these things that we kind of take for granted that make these situations a little easier to manage, they just happened organically. So as for the Olympics in 96, I, like almost 900 other people, had been working 7 days a week for that year. And we had already arrested McVeigh and Nichols, but there was still the case to unfold, preparing for trial. But my unit at headquarters, called the Critical Incident Response Group, again, the bomb tech, it's a small, there's 200 of us, right? So the unit chief back, he said, hey, I know you're kind of been crushing it there in Oklahoma. We need a counter IED team leader at the Olympics. Kind of a little vacation away from the pressure of why don't you come to the Olympics? We know your folks are in Birmingham. There's a soccer venue there. So as kind of a little break, why don't you go to the Olympics? Well, of course, the evening of that bombing, I was with some Olympic officials at a little bar sitting outside. It was, in nighttime. And the bartender came out and said, hey, what about that bomb in Atlanta? I was like, man, that's not even funny. He goes, no, really. And he turned on CNN again, because that was the only news channel. And I had a cell phone by then. So my cell phone said, get to Atlanta. And so I left that night. And our team that was working the venue in Atlanta worked that post blast. And my team and I kind of backfilled their positions at the Olympics until the final ceremonies.
Something else you said when you were wrapping up the Oklahoma City bombing, you said you were working 7 days a week, and probably, speak to this, that the average person maybe not know about, like law enforcement. Just because the arrest happens or you have the person in custody, that's not when the work stops.
Well, that's absolutely right. When we had McVeigh and Nichols in custody, but there was still months of investigation. Those arrests were one thing, But the standard of proof, obviously in court, particularly federal court, for a case of this magnitude is very high. So there were leads around the world. There was literally no stone left unturned. We had a report of a guy that was in custody in a foreign country that confessed to bombing the building. Well, you can't not check that out. But it turns out I worked with our legal attaches through the embassies. He was wanted in the U.S. for a major art theft. And he knew that the country that had him in custody would not extradite for a capital crime. So he said, I blew up the building. So we had to prove he didn't. So there was 1,008,000 man hours expended during the course of that investigation. And a lot of it was things like that. Just as you know, it's kind of chess, not checkers. You have to think a few moves ahead about what the defense might say and blunt all those arguments. Because what we're looking for is just, the truth. But the defense job is to provide a strong defense. So we have to kind of anticipate what those arguments might be and make sure we've covered those bases.
You said 1 million hours?
1,008,000 man hours. Yeah.
That's unprecedented.
And then the fact that the waters get muddy now because now you have people who don't even know anything about the incident who are saying I did it.
Right. Well, he was overseas. Again, we were talking about the national and international stage. There was a lot of eyes, which is fine. Things should be done properly and above board, and we shouldn't mind scrutiny. But there was it's a very sad situation. The medical examiner, great guy, smart guy, gave a press release that the FBI didn't know was coming. And said, hey, we've got a leg here that belongs to a Middle Eastern male that's not attributable to any known victim. Well, the media took that and ran. The defense took it and ran. Said, well, there's the real bomber, this Middle Eastern male, international terrorism. Well, we've got to get to the bottom of that. So I got the ticket to resolve this leg issue. And I'm an accountant, bomb guy. I'm got no medical training whatsoever. But they said, go down and figure it out. So I met with the doctors. Of course, they're overworked. The facility is overwhelmed, 168 dead instantly, and not everybody's intact. So I said, can you all swap files and just kind of look at each other's work? We're all human. And I'm sure they did. It didn't seem to take very long, but I'm sure they reviewed each other's files. And they said, we don't see a problem. Well, we have to get to the bottom of this. Can somebody explain how these files are organized? And I went through them. I think because I was an accountant, they asked me to kind of go through those records and found some anomalies that warranted some further investigation. But I reached the end of my capabilities pretty quickly. And I didn't know I could do it, but I called the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology and the Smithsonian Institute and Dr. Clyde Snow and Dr. Emily Craig, who were world-renowned forensic pathologists. Our DNA unit, hairs and fibers unit, special photo unit, said everybody fly to Oklahoma City and figure this out. And it got approved and somebody paid for it all. But this group of experts met me at the ME's office with this leg, which was clad in military style clothing, had a military boot. And within just a few days, they came up with this very incredible report. They said, this is not a Middle Eastern male. This is an African-American female. About this height, about this weight, about this age, and very good physical condition. And the special photo unit was able to raise a 4-number string that had one letter in front of it. Well, I asked our Army CID agent that was on our task force, I said, what could that be? What does this letter and 4 numbers mean? Well, of course, he said that's probably the first initial of the last name and the last 4 of the social for personal property stuff. So I had the Social Security Administration send me all the Social Security numbers for all the known victims, and I found a match for the number, but not for the letter. But this young lady was an African-American female, about the right height, age, weight, and she was in the Air Force. So I had the Air Force Office of Special Investigations send me her personnel jacket. She had enlisted under her maiden name, which was the correct initial, and when we had enough for DNA and inked prints to determine that was her leg, which had just been mistakenly put in a different body bag. And we were able to, it was buried with her eventually. And her family was quite grateful. But again, had we not been able to resolve this leg, that was just another defense argument that had to be put to rest.
It's amazing.
Well, it is. What I'm learning is that when Barry calls you, whether it's a laser, doggy socks, or two high-level scientists, you answer.
Well, it's just nice to have the help. You have to know what you know, but it's sometimes more important to know what you don't know.
Yeah,
But know who can help you.
that's awesome.
Sorry, I completely derailed us. You were talking Olympics, and I took us right back to Oklahoma.
No, that's perfect. And to that point, hey Barry, you've been working hard. Let's send you to Atlanta for a couple days. Get to enjoy the Olympics. You're having what you think is some drinks, some colleagues or whatever, and boom, quite literally, didn't mean to do that.
That was a good pun. Yeah.
Another bomb, and there you are, and you talked about that. So let's then 9/11. Let's go into that stage. So you have a little bit of time. I'm sure you're working cases and calls, but from '96 to 2001, any world events that we don't know about that Barry was at?
Well, terrorism was on the rise, international and domestic terrorism, and Director Free really increased the FBI's presence abroad through the embassies. And we have, they're called legal attaches and associate or assistant legal attaches that work with the ambassadors in host nations. Well, if we can prevent terrorist organizations from being operational overseas, we don't see them here. So there was a big push to train our host nation partners in counterterrorism type events. So in that intervening time, I spent a good bit of time abroad. I worked on every continent but Antarctica in my time, and was training, counterterrorism commandos and law enforcement. And in different countries, they're called different things. But for instance, after Crimea fell, I went and worked with the Ukrainian Special Forces and our Green Berets in Ukraine to help prepare them for the war they were fighting against Russia. So it was an interesting twist. But that to lead to 9/11, of course, that morning, like everybody, I was driving to work and heard on the an FM radio station a plane had hit the Trade Center. Well, that had happened once before. A plane had hit the Empire State Building in fog, back during just after World War II. But by the time I got into our secure area, they'd said a second plane had hit, and our EOC was already standing up. And then the events that day unfolded, and our bomb technician in New York, Lenny Hatton's a great guy. He was killed when the buildings collapsed. So that left our office there without a senior FBI bomb technician. So they sent 4 of us to New York, and others went to Shanksville and the Pentagon. But I flew to New York, and I've been to New York several times. It's a busy place. It was desolate. It was like a ghost town. It was strange flying in. The plane went silent, and you could see the smoke still rising from the trade centers. We didn't have Uber then, so I took a cab from the airport to my hotel. Not another car in sight. It was quite strange, but the devastation of Ground Zero was just really indescribable.
Yeah, and can you put that in perspective to Oklahoma City bombing? Because when you describe that, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's enormous. Like you said, I mean, it's like a small earthquake. Can you put that in perspective to now what you're now seeing on the ground in New York?
So the Murrah Building occupied a city block, and it was destroyed. The front, I'll say 2/3 of the building was really effectively gone. The blast had destroyed that building to the back wall, and buildings across the street had been structurally damaged. Roofs were blown off. Glass was broken in about a 12-block radius, 12 city blocks. Cars were on fire, in the parking lot across the street. Juxtapose that with Ground Zero, that was 14 acres of absolute, just complete destruction. My first view of Ground Zero, I walked down the riverside to come in through this atrium. There's a garden atrium there. They've been rebuilt it since, and the water side didn't look very bad. But as I walked through, I remember there were a bunch of I think they were royal palm trees, these beautiful big palm trees covered in this fine white powder, and the other end of that glass tube was just gone, and it opened up onto this 13 acres of just a hellscape.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can ever really wrap their heads around that. That's I don't even know how to follow that up. That's just still devastating to think about that day and the aftermath, and how
Well, the world changed. The world changed. I was in Times Square when the news came out that America had started airstrikes, and this was a all hands on deck response. Diplomatic, financial, criminal, military. This was something new and different. Um, and when Operation Neptune Spear, where the SEAL team killed Bin Laden, afterwards, one of my partners in Washington sent me Bin Laden's 10 Most Wanted Fugitive poster with the word deceased stamped across it. These are historic events for sure.
Yeah. Hollywood, the red, the blue, the green wire. What
Never the blue wire.
What do we cut? What do Aaron and I need to cut if we're in this situation? What do they get wrong? I mean, what's something that just describe, being there with, obviously this is different than being there from a bomb that's exploded. Let's take this from a different approach.
The movies are the movies, and they're entertaining and fun to watch. The big, glowing fireball is just usually not part of it, and the slow walk away with you back to the bomb, that rarely happens either. It's going to be a little lonely. I mean, you're down there on your own. The men and women that do it, both the law enforcement and the military, have a very daunting job. That whole the explosive ordnance disposal EOD group, and then the law enforcement that took over in 71 for domestic events had really no tools. It was very rudimentary when I started. Went to bomb school in '94. There were a lot of homemade tools still being used, but now with technology, we have digital X-ray systems instead of literal Polaroid wet film that we used to use. You'd approach a device and hope you got a picture. Then you'd have to come back and develop it in a little Polaroid developer and cross your fingers that you actually got an X-ray you could use to try to defeat the device. Now it's all digital, and there's digital enhancement. So the technology has made it a lot safer. We can send robots down. There weren't robots prior. We had to borrow robots from the Army in Waco. So now most every bomb squad has at least one. So the technology's changed a lot. It's still dangerous. Explosives are inherently dangerous, but if we can separate the bomb techs from the bombs and use remote tools and precision tools, which we have now, it makes things a lot less hairy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Your perspective from this, a normal detective, normal law enforcement officer goes into a room, he or she sees things. I mean, from details as an accountant to sniper to bomb. I mean, what's your perspective? What's your train of thought? I mean, how do you look at things differently?
Well, it's funny. Even now, I've been retired since 2019, and I tend to approach things about what could go wrong. How could whatever the situation is not turn out like I want it to. Just so you have a plan. And that's something that I think is kind of hard to let go of. One of the more interesting calls we had down in Lawton, Oklahoma, where Fort Sill is located, it's a critical Army post. Call came in, 911. A lady said, he's got a gun and he's going to kill me. And the line went dead. So they sent a local officer, by himself. It was the middle of the night. He made entry, exigent circumstance, see if the lady was okay. Apartment was empty, but he thought it was a meth lab because this whole apartment had been converted to like this chemistry experiment. So they called in a DEA meth lab team, And they start searching and they're like, well, there's unidentified chemicals, some dual use chemicals. But then they found a bunch of explosives and weapons and bullets and thought this might be a bomb factory. So they called me because this is right by the military installation. This was after Fort Hood. And you have to see these things in their totality, right? Is this another potential attack on a military installation? So I went in with the high patrol bomb techs, and there were just too many chemicals for us to test. We have mass spectrometers and some testing capability, but the volume was too large. Well, there's a plan which we exercise. The National Guard has what we call civil support teams with full mobile labs and PhDs in chemistry and biology. They have to be dispatched through the governor, but we exercise these plans, and I'd never had to do it. But I thought, yeah, I think this is the time. So I, as you said, had the relationships with the colonel and the team. They rolled it out, and it was well before sunrise. And the lieutenant, who was a PhD in chemistry, says, the colonel wants to see you. So we went to the command trailer, and he goes, we have the precursors for phosgene oxime, CX. It's a chemical warfare agent. And our tests, most tests will give false positives intentionally because you don't want to miss it. You'd rather have it misidentified. So I said, look, this was a preliminary test. There's a second tier test, which takes a couple of hours. And he had already started that. But at any rate, the resources needed to address that threat based on the chemistry were in Washington. So there's a plan that I'd never ever thought I'd have to exercise or execute. But we made this call. It's a bunch of scientists, and I said, look, I'm gonna let you talk to the chemistry PhD because I'm an accountant and a bomb guy. So they did their thing, and our scientists were convinced it was enough to send a team out. So a Bureau jet loaded with scientists and a bunch of equipment flew out to Lawton, which is not a big town, did all the tests. There were precursors, but the guy was making his own hallucinogens. It was not a chemical weapon at all. It was just a bad attempt at science. But his Facebook page had said, I'm one lab disaster away from being a supervillain. So, yeah,
Well,
I think he's still in jail now, by the way.
I was going to ask you, like, what keeps you up at night that you can talk about? That sounds like something that would definitely keep me up at night, just had it not been drugs.
It was a 3-day stay. Yeah, we were there for a full 3 days. I had you were talking about a go kit. I had to go to J.C. Penney and buy some pants because I'd been there too long.
Maybe you can talk about explosives a little bit just for people that don't know, because it's not the fireball, it's not even necessarily the shrapnel that can do the damage or injure people, because we use explosive charges on our SWAT team. So we would make charges with det cord, and it's just such a small amount of explosive material, and it's like the pressure that could damage people so much.
Right. So we're mostly made up of water, which is basically incompressible. So even breaching tools like you're describing, there's a distance is your friend, right? But that is called overpressure at the point of detonation can do a great deal of damage beyond just your hearing. I don't hear quite as well as I used to, but yeah, you have to be careful about the overpressure, and that really does a great deal of the damage. That's what blows out all the glass, as I mentioned in Oklahoma City, and a lot of the injuries in large explosions are from the overpressure and flying debris. When we worked with the medical community after bombing events, a lot of times they won't check for lung damage, soft tissue damage internally, because that's just it's an anomaly. It doesn't usually happen in car crashes and the standard things most ER docs will see. But in large scale bombings, you have to look for that soft tissue internal damage.
It's amazing. Sorry, we're in awe here. Let's skip to present day. You said you teach now, right? The modern day CSI and the modern day thoughts. What's the hardest myth, or what are some myths, or what are some perceptions that are hard for you that you have to drill pretty quick?
Well, we call it the CSI effect. There's way too much TV and movies where these super complex crimes are solved in 60 minutes with commercials. Um, there's always fingerprints, DNA, and facial recognition. I was asked to testify before Congress on the January 6th IEDs back when the Capitol was overrun. And some of the congressional representatives said, well, it's been, 3 years and the FBI is not trying. They haven't caught anybody. Why not? I was like, these things take time. It took, years to get Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, years to get Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber. Yeah, it's been 3 years, but given enough time and some information, just a thread to pull, this person will eventually get caught, and they were. To answer your question, it's this theory that things can be solved immediately. A lot of times it's just good police work, interviews, reviewing data. Turns out the Bureau had all of the phone data and some other video, but you have to go through it. Somebody knows what they're doing has to be able to extract it, examine it. So it's, priority things get the first attention.
Yeah, I remember I had a federal trial and it was a voir dire, jury selection, and the assistant U.S. attorney immediately, when he had the entire potential jury pool there, says, "We don't solve crimes in an hour. You're going to hear an investigation that took years to work."
And it's
and
tedious.
yeah, and you had to actually say that out loud to the potential jurors. So to your point, where people get in their mind that in 1 hour you're going to be able to get around New York and D.C. and solve the
Right.
crime.
Or why isn't there DNA?
Yeah.
Why isn't, you didn't find my client's fingerprint? Well, right. A lot of times you just don't. So, yeah, there's a lot of, CSI myth out there that it makes it a little more difficult, but give them the time to process a scene properly and then do the proper analysis. The evidence is there. You just have to find it.
Yeah, from the Timothy McVeighs to the modern day villains, I mean, the technology's obviously gotten better, for which is bad and good. But how about the motives? How about the villains? What's your perception there? Like, the why, the reasons behind the, their their horrific acts. Any thoughts on that?
As far as motivations, there's not much new under the sun. Uh, Hatred is hatred, religious zealots, racial, issues. It seems now with the internet, people are emboldened to do and say things when there's some anonymity that they wouldn't do or say, in person. And, you're alone in your basement and get stirred up and have nothing but time and hate. Then you get some of these really horrific events. You asked earlier what's disturbing. I think it's the lone wolf, someone that's literally on their own, doesn't tell anybody what they're planning, goes and commits these acts. It's difficult. We need somebody to say something to have that thread to pull. So lone actors that oftentimes are inspired by either domestic or international groups to go do something on their own, and we've seen it, here domestically and certainly abroad. But that the lone wolf attacks are a problem.
Want to get your take on maybe technology because me as the layperson, something that like concerns me. You know, back in the day, drones get introduced, and like our team had one, but it was great because it's a surveillance tool. But that was it because they couldn't carry a payload, right? So it's a good eye in the sky. But now, like, no, drones can carry a payload.
Right. Right. Well, they're cheap, over the counter, and are easily modified. The internet's a wonderful thing, but there are, I think, 2,000 pages of IED recipes on the internet to make homemade explosives and, make a bomb. There was a magazine by one of the terrorist organizations called How to Make a Bomb in the Kitchen of Your Mom. It was just making bombs with homemade stuff. So, yeah, the technology's out there to weaponize, almost anything. Um, you can kill somebody with a hammer, but you can't outlaw hammers, So sometimes it takes time for the laws to catch up with the threat. And as technology grows so quickly, the lawmakers have to be pretty agile to keep up with the threat.
You've seen the worst in humanity. I mean, you've walked around scenes that people just can't comprehend. How do you not become cynical? How do you stay focused?
I think you have to try. You have to make a concerted effort. I say friends, family, faith. Those things that will ground you. Otherwise, there are bad people out there, just inherently bad people, but most are not. Most are good, and you try to find the good in folks. I do a little volunteer work. I serve on a couple of boards. Um, so yeah, you see bad things, and you can't unsee them. My students, they're young in their 20s. I'll say if you do this very long, you're going to see things that you just can't unsee. What people will do to one another, and it's really horrible. But you can't dwell on that. When I was in New York for the 9/11 deployment, we stayed right in Times Square, and my shift was overnight. Well, you can't sleep in New York in the daytime; it's too loud. And just sitting in that hotel by myself, waiting for the next 12-hour shift was not healthy. It wasn't good for me. So I would get out. One day I walked 40 blocks, just out in the sunshine, walked through Central Park, ended up at a fire station, talking to some of the firefighters at FDNY, and met one of the drivers, an engine driver. Well, he had responded, and the truck he drove was crushed when the buildings came down, and he remembered hearing what he thought were wet sacks of concrete hitting the sidewalk. It was people jumping from the building. And I didn't know this man, but we sat down and talked, had coffee, just kind of shared experience. Um, you've been on the job and you see things that you can really only talk to other cops about or somebody that's seen it or something like it. So I think it's helpful to make yourself available to folks that may be struggling, that have seen things that they're not really sure, how to process. A couple of agents one night, we went out to dinner, and they were asking a lot like you were asking. Well, what could that have done? This one agent was in the subway below the trade center when it collapsed. Well, she was worried. How close did I come to dying? And these are real serious questions. And if you don't know, then it's who do you ask, right? So I don't know that I can offer any good advice, but I'm always happy to listen and talk to folks, first responders, military. I'm getting calls still from some military folks I've taught, and we became friends that are now getting out after 20 years of service. And these are friendships that can last a lifetime. So it's important that you look beyond the bad stuff.
It's something that like our career field is just now, I guess, starting to get into and hasn't done a very good job is the mental health and wellness of officers and law enforcement, first responders, right? Because coming up in late '90s, early 2000s, like you don't talk about that, right? Like we're all supposed to be these program robots that we don't like have feelings.
Yeah. Well, you know, one event is one event, but after 20 or 30 years of it's I tell people it's like putting a brick in your backpack. Each one just adds a little to your load, and it's cumulative. One of the first events I went to, one of our operators, former Green Beret, great guy, but his response was basically, as you said, put some dirt on it and move on. We'll go to the next one, and that's a coping mechanism. The next one's coming, so you just got to move on. But I think you do have to recognize that we are humans. We've got kids and wives and families, and um, there you have to be aware of the weight that puts on you. Alcohol doesn't work, drugs don't work. You can't go home and kick the dog. You have to have some way to deal with it, and a lot of times it's friends. Um, Interests outside, usually those of us in law enforcement, military, we gravitate to others that are in law enforcement in the military, and you get a little insulated. So I make a point to have interests outside that core group of friends and family that do that kind of work, just so you can see there's other good things going on.
Hmm.
Wow. So became an FBI agent at age 24, 31 years in the Bureau. all types of assignments, incidents, response. What surprises you most looking back at your career?
The fact that I got to do it at all really, really surprises me. So many people don't have the opportunity to fulfill that childhood dream. Um, I, for whatever reason, was fortunate enough to just get in the FBI. And then these specialties that are pretty narrow in and of themselves, I was able to do that. Uh, I was really honored when the Forensic Science Institute asked me to come teach after retirement. I was just going to learn to fish or something else. Never considered teaching courses at the university level, but I really enjoy that. This is the next group of people that are going to do the jobs we all did, the three of us did, and they're interested. I like to think I'm giving back a little bit. And then in retirement, I just sort of really for my son, and if he has kids one day, what did grandpa do? So I just sort of jotted down these different things, and it turned into this little book, which I'm stunned was published. I never dreamed of that. So uh, I'm just surprised it all worked out, to answer your question.
I want to ask you about well, we both want to talk about the book, but real quick, I know you're still quote unquote working, but you spent 31 years running to danger. I need to know what the first thing you did the day you retired. What was that?
It was unusual. I turned my cell phone off. It was as you guys know, whether you're on a SWAT team or any kind of reactive team, when your phone goes, you get up and leave. And for the first time in about 3 decades, I turned my phone off. Did not set an alarm. It was very strange. It took really some getting used to because we're tethered to that phone, particularly in reactive teams. But just it took some time to kind of decompress a little and realize I don't have to be anywhere. It was strange.
Let's talk about the book.
It's Hazardous Devices: Memoir of an FBI Bomb Technician, Accountant, and Sniper.
I tried to purchase it today. I need to talk to you offline, or actually just tell us now, where do we find this book?
Yeah, so it's available directly from the publisher at McFarland Publishing, or on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Is available for order. They'll be delivering soon, really wherever books are sold. But it's out there. I know folks that have ordered straight from the publisher have already received their copies, and folks that are ordering on Amazon and Barnes and Noble have a delivery date pending. So it's out there, which again just stuns me. Somebody called me an author Sunday at church. I'm like, well, I guess technically I am. It's very unusual for me.
Are you doing training outside of an agency or somebody wanted to bring you in?
Sure. I am doing some training and give some presentations. I've got a little website. It's barryblackokc.com. I've done some training for several federal agencies and some private entities. And I enjoy doing that. I was asked to go speak at the Dallas Holocaust Museum, and just sort of lessons learned and the temperature of the country kind of thing. And it's a little outside just the FBI part, but with 31 years of kind of a broad base, it's more just, perspective. But yeah, I enjoy giving those presentations, and the teaching. I've taught at a couple other universities now that I've retired as well. You have to have something to do. You can't just sit at home, right? So I think this book thing was going to be my hobby for a while.
Yeah. What do you want people to get from the book? Like, what's the takeaway? Or give me one takeaway.
What I wanted, as I said, was just a synopsis of those 30 years and the work that law enforcement and our military partners do every day is really uncommon. And I was fortunate. One of my white collar cases was on unsolved mysteries. It was a multi-million-dollar case, kind of a complex accounting thing. So this was back during the Robert Stack days, back in the old days of unsolved mysteries. So I thought, okay, well that, I peaked. I've got unsolved mysteries. But then there's Waco, and then the Olympics and 9/11. And my last case was undercover thing with a guy that wanted to blow up a bank here downtown. So my goal for the book was just to paint kind of a broad brush picture that may be different than what folks see on television. A lot of opportunities, and you have to take advantage. As I said, at 9/11, it was pretty somber, but I just wasn't going to sit in the hotel room until the next call came. So, I was in Nepal when the kingdom became a democracy. I was there for their 4th of July, basically, and we were working there. Some of their national police had been murdered because there was a group that didn't want the democracy to happen, and so we were working with them to resolve those issues. But I chartered a plane to go see Mount Everest. I mean, I'm in Nepal. Why wouldn't you, go find the Yeti, right? So you have to seize the opportunities where you can. And so the book's a little foodie stuff, a little travel stuff, a lot of the different cases, some history, of these bigger events. But uh, it's a pretty broad brush. So I'm hopeful it's well received.
That is amazing. Uh, Final for me. How do you want to be remembered?
Well, I think everybody wants a legacy of some sort. I think to be remembered as a as just a good person is critical. Somebody that's willing to give, not just take. Those of us, as you mentioned earlier, in public service, sometimes it's a thankless job. But even the people that purportedly despise the police will call 911 when they need some help, right? And folks will come help them. So I think the legacy is just to try to be remembered as a good person.
Aaron? This was a lot. This was an honor to talk to you and share your story, and we're excited to get copies of this book, and
Well, thank you.
maybe we
Now,
can
it's
do a
it's been a
follow-up.
pleasure speaking with you guys. Uh, I hope this is what you had in mind. As I said, I'm kind of new to this part of it, but yeah, if y'all could link the book or the website or something, that would be amazing. And if you end up with the book, I'd love to hear what you thought, because I've never done this before. So I'm interested in some feedback.
That's good though. It's organic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a one trick pony. Somebody said, "What's your next book?" I said, "This is it." I got nothing else in me. So
Well, yeah. Thank you very much.
thank you, guys.
It's been Detective Case and Close podcast, and this was Barry Black. We hope you check out the links. We'll put them on the screen here, and we hope you buy the book, and we hope you share this. This was a fascinating conversation with a fascinating individual who deserves your attention.
Thank you both. I appreciate your time and look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.